Greetings and good evening. My name is Nancy Victor Green, and I am the president of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Incorporated Manhattan chapter. On behalf of our board of directors and members, I welcome you to our program this evening, Revolutionary Weight Loss Drugs. Are they right for you? The National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Incorporated is a 43-year-old non-for-profit advocacy organization. Our mission is to advocate on behalf of Black women and girls to promote leadership development and gender equity in the areas of health, education, and economic empowerment. The Manhattan chapter was chartered in December 1992, and there are currently 63 NCBW chapters in the United States. This evening, we are here to share, learn, and grow together, especially focusing on empowering Black women with the latest knowledge in health and wellness. Obesity is a complex topic, but today we're diving into it headfirst, exploring innovative management approaches and discussing the ins and outs of GLP-1 therapy. It's all about understanding what's out there and what could work best for you. This is more than just a learning session. It's a safe space for conversation, questions, and community building. Whether you're here to find answers, share your journey, or simply listen, your presence enriches our gathering. We are all here to support each other in making informed choices about our health. Thank you for joining us this evening. And I now want to turn it over to Janera Gaston, our first Vice President of Programs, who will serve as our moderator to introduce our speaker.
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much, Nancy. And I'm going to ask you to just manage the door for me while we get into the session. Just a little housekeeping before I do turn it over to Dr. Lofton, who will be guiding us through this important information. We should have all of the lines muted for the duration of the program. Dr. Lofton, during her presentation, will take some pauses at different sections to answer your questions, to answer any questions you may have. And then when we're finished, we will pause and we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions live if you choose after her presentation is completed. I was joking with some of my coalition sisters this week about how, Oprah beat me to the punch on this session here. And, I was a little, salty about Oprah coming, doing this. I couldn't have planned it. But then I said, you know what, everything, the universe has a plan for everything. And, there's, just so far that Oprah can go, right, in the way she delivers the information. And the way we deliver the information, the way we bring you the information is always about our lens and helping you understand these the information and the journey through the lens of unique challenges and triumphs that we face as women of color, or people of color. And so I definitely want to reiterate Nancy's point about, we're here to discuss and learn and empower one another, and and engage in what I hope is definitely an interest. It's going to be an interesting discussion, but an engaging discussion. So that said, let me introduce our speaker for the evening, Dr. Holly Lofton. Dr. Lofton is a clinical associate professor of medicine and surgery at NYU Langone Health. Dr. Lofton has been at the forefront of medical weight management since 2012. She is the visionary behind the New You Weight Loss Program, which is a testament to her commitment to not just results, but also educating her patients on nutrition and promoting a healthy lifestyle. Dr. Lofton's contributions to the field are vast and impactful. She's been an active member on the board of the Obesity Action Coalition and contributed her expertise to the American Society for Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery's Bariatric Medicine Committee. That's a question I'm going to have. Is even bariatric surgery a thing anymore, as a result of everything we're going through? So that's a question we'll talk about later. Her current research endeavors are pioneering, and they focus on the use of pharmacotherapy for weight regain post-bariatric surgery, and she's involved in groundbreaking clinical drug trials. Beyond her clinical and research accomplishments, Dr. Lofton is passionate about education. She dedicates herself to training the next generation of physicians and healthcare professionals on diagnosing and treating obesity, tackling weight bias, and more. Her efforts to educate the public about the importance of maintaining a healthy weight have taken her to platforms like the Today Show and CNN, where she shares her knowledge and insights. Today, we are privileged to have Dr. Lofton share her knowledge with us. And so again, I encourage you, take notes, engage actively in the conversation, and I turn it over to you, Dr. Lofton.
Thank you very much, Janira. Thank you, Nancy, for inviting me. Thank you all for being here and taking the time tonight. I'll make sure to leave plenty of room for questions throughout the presentation and at the end. And tonight's topic is revolutionary weight loss drugs. Are they right for you or someone you know or love, or just to get some information about it? So we'll talk about this topic, a few different things I want you to know. The first question I was asked to mention is, what is obesity? So obesity is a medical condition that is defined by the excessive accumulation of fat. So I tell my patients that just as we think of, say, a thyroid condition, where the thyroid is the organ of dysfunction, when the thyroid is underactive, for example, we give thyroid hormone back. In obesity, the gland that is dysfunctional is the fat cell. And this is an organ that we all have in different amounts, but the fat cell, we'll talk about this in more detail later, is an organ that can grow out of control, and it causes medical conditions of two types, really. There is inflammation that occurs because of the size of the fat cell. The bigger it gets, more inflammation it can cause. And that can lead to things like diabetes, heart disease, cholesterol, other conditions. And just the accumulation of the fatty tissue, adipose tissue, can cause the weight to bear problems with health. So this is why we have arthritis when someone gains weight. This is why we have what we call restrictive lung disease. It's hard to take a deep breath if the fat mass is pushing up on one's lungs. So these are things that we think of as medical physicians and in the medical field about obesity as a condition. So that's really the definition from the World Health Organization. Now, there are some numerical definitions, and I use these more because we have to define obesity or overweight for definition for the medical chart to give a diagnosis and also to justify medication. So if I'm going to prescribe pharmacotherapy, a medication for weight loss, I have to prove the patient has obesity. And what does that mean? Obesity is defined as a body mass index, which is a height-weight ratio. We can all easily measure our own, of 30 kilograms per meter squared or more. Overweight is a condition that's BMI 25 kilograms per meter squared or more. However, these are not the only ways that we can diagnose excessive fat accumulation. And I won't go through the details of this slide, but I want to let you know that these are some of the hormonal pathways that are active that cause us to have weight changes, whether our weight's going up or down. So what I'll point out here first is the brain in the middle. The brain has an appetite center right in the front of the brain. And it's called the ventral nucleus of the hypothalamus. It sits in the front of the brain, and it gets signals from the stomach, and it sends signals to the stomach. And one of those signals comes from the stomach to say, I'm getting full. Send a message to stop eating. And that hormone that sends the message from the intestines to the brain is called GLP-1. So you see it here. GLP-1 is a hormone that we all make in our bodies. And as we start to take in a meal, the gut says, I'm getting satisfied. I'm getting enough nutrients. So let me send a message to the brain via GLP-1 to activate the satiety signal. And then the brain sends us a message to stop eating. So I inform my patients that when we give GLP-1 agonist, we're giving you back a hormone that you have already, but you don't have enough of it. And that's how we use these medications to treat obesity. Just as we're giving the thyroid hormone back to patients that have low thyroid function, We're giving hormonal responses that tell us to decrease food intake. And there are some other benefits of GLP-1 as well. I inform my patients, these medications do suppress appetite to a degree. About 80% of the brain's hunger signals are blocked. But one really important way the medication works, because we know that obesity does not always come from excessive eat less and move more, they simply cannot lose weight. That's because, again, the fat cell is dysregulated and wants to get bigger and bigger, even though we're trying to bring its size down. The fat cell's a gland, just like, again, an ovary. We can't just say ovulate, can we? No, we can't make the fat cell just shrink. GLP-1 also makes the body more sensitive to the insulin that we make in our pancreas, which is one of these organs, should be the pancreas there. And that makes us metabolize glucose better, and that makes fat cells shrink. So what GLP-1s do is they go to the brain and block about 80% of the brain's hunger signals. They go to the stomach and make the stomach empty more slowly, so the patient feels less hungry and more full. And the third thing that's often forgotten is it helps fat cells shrink hormonally. Now, obesity is its own condition, but it's associated with over 200 conditions, many of which you can see here, and including the mental health state. And mental health disease often coexist with obesity. I screen all my patients for depression, anxiety when they come in initially and at follow-ups. But I know that many of us worry about, what's the issue is having my weight higher than this normal BMI, because it can put us at risk for other conditions as well. But this is a multifactorial condition. So it's more than calories in, calories out. And I want you to leave here understanding this is not a disease of excessive caloric intake only. The Venn diagram you see here takes into account genes. Up to 70% of our weight is determined by our genes, and we cannot change them. I don't have any medications that can change our genes either, though they are working on some of the pipeline. Now, the environmental aspect of obesity we're all aware of. This is our diet, exercise, behaviors, but there are other things that can impact the connection between environment and genes. This is what we call epigenetics. A lot of times when I ask patients, when did you start to gain weight? A lot of my patients from other countries, from the Caribbean, will say, when I moved to the United States from Jamaica, Barbados, etc., I ate what I wanted there, but I came here to eat the same things and it's different. I'm gaining weight. Epigenetics is the idea and the concept. This has been proven that there are things in the environment that can turn on or off genes that were previously flipped the other way. So it's very possible there's something in the American food supply that would turn on a gene for obesity in someone, say, who immigrated from Jamaica, for example. This we have to keep in mind. And then, of course, there's the physiology, how my body is different than your body and everyone else is on the call. And that's why we can do the same exact diet and exercise the exact same amount, and we all get different outcomes with weight. So the physiology is what we're trying to adjust in people to help them lose weight while working on the diet, exercise, the behaviors, and there's not too much we can do about genes right now. Now, there are a lot of population-based initiatives. We know governments spend a lot of time trying to make it easier for us to have access to fruit stands and sidewalks that we can walk in, and have parks and gyms and screen children for obesity. However, obesity rates are still increasing. This is evidence that lifestyle alone is ineffective. And here are some of the statistics. You've probably seen these CDC obesity maps. This was 2020, and you see as the colors get closer to the red with dots, they are indicating greater obesity reported in every state. There was a time when there was a less than 10% bar, and now you see no states are less than 10% of patients with people with self-reported obesity. In many states, I'm from Georgia, many states, we have the South, here, we have a significantly greater risk likelihood of having obesity in certain states as well. Now, this is 2020. Now, if we look at, this is all US adults. If we look at this amongst non-Hispanic Black adults, this is males and females, we see these numbers are much darker red. Okay, we don't see any green. We don't see any less than 20%. We don't see any less than 25%. We see a couple of yellows over there in North Dakota. But there are many reasons for this. One, the BMI cutoffs, we'll talk about how they may not necessarily reflect health, but they are the cutoffs for obesity, and that's why these numbers are higher. So we see almost 50% of the population, we're looking at non-Hispanic Blacks in America, having obesity or overweight. And I also included the numbers for other ethnicities as well, so you can see the vast difference. So it's a very prevalent problem. And I get this question a lot, and I think it's very important that we all leave the call understanding this concept. And sorry, I have a typo there, and keep it off. I was making slide changes at the last minute. I want you to understand this concept of what we call metabolic adaptation, and please share it with those who are not here. This is a graph of patients, of a patient I have. I've been seeing, still to this day, I've been seeing him since I started NYU 12 years ago. I still see him almost every month. So we see his amazing weight loss, about 70 pounds in that first year. And then with our best efforts, even with medications, we saw 50% of that weight has been regained. And this is even going back to last year, and he's still around this range this year as well. So why does this happen? With our best efforts, we see weight loss, but we tend to see about 50% of that regain. And that is a common theme in many medical clinical trials, even with best efforts with dietitians, et cetera, exercise, calorie goals, we see 50% weight regain. The concept of metabolic adaptation is one I want you to understand tonight. I'm sure we've all experienced this. We go to caloric deficit diet and we eat less and we get some weight loss, and then we continue to do the same thing and we don't have any further weight loss. Why does this happen? Well, one thing we have to think about is metabolism. And when we speak about metabolism, what you're really thinking about is how much energy does it take for you to live? Okay. Now, that's including your resting metabolic rate. And that basically is how much energy does it take for you if you wake up one day and just don't move at all. That's your resting metabolic rate. And we can have 10 people of the same height and weight have different resting metabolic rates. And I'll talk about why. Our total metabolism also has to take into effect the thermic effect of food, or how much energy does it take to burn off the food that you're eating. And this is why diets that are high in fiber, protein, and water are recommended, because it takes a lot of energy to burn those off. And then we think about the activity energy expenditure. How much energy are you spending just moving about your day, either whether it's through activities of daily living or through additionally purposeful exercise. And when we look at the resting metabolic rate, the reason I tell you this, it's different in people who may even be the exact same height and weight, is because we can only control so many of these determinants. Our resting metabolic rate is determined by our genes, our age, our gender, whether or not obesity exists, whether fat cells are a certain size, if there's insulin resistance. Now, all these key determinants, we can only control our diet, our exercise, and our activity. We don't have control over some of the others. Now, what happens when someone tries to eat less and move more, as we had in the previous slide there, is because the person is smaller, so they lost 50 pounds, for example, they're a smaller person, your resting metabolic rate drops. So the total energy expenditure drops. And that's why it's hard to get more weight loss with the same effect. So what do we tell you to do? The doctor says, and the trainer says, well, exercise more to make up that drop in your resting metabolic rate. Now, then you get into a situation where you're saying, well, how much more do I need to exercise? And how much more do I need to drop my calories? And eventually it can become an impossible situation to sustain long-term. And this is part of why we see weight regain, because when we eat less and move more, our metabolisms drop. And we try to make that up with physical activity, but we know how hard that can be to maintain consistently day after day after day. So we have this cycle where one of my patients will restrict their calories, their fat mass will go down, meaning they're a smaller person, their resting metabolic rate goes down. Now, what happens to their appetite? Leptin is a hormone that is secreted by the fat cell. And when there's enough fat cells, the leptin says to the brain, stop eating. But when our resting metabolic rates go down, the leptin levels decrease. So we have fewer signals telling us not to eat. Ghrelin is a hormone that tells you to eat. You should eat. You're hungry. It gives you a hunger hormone. When we eat less and move more and our fat mass go down, that hunger hormone goes up while the fullness hormone is going down. Thus, we have an appetite increase, and that leads to weight regain. Now, if you take into consideration that the average American tries 8 serious times to lose weight in one's life, this cycles and makes it harder and harder every time one tries to restrict calories. And that's the reason why people tell me I'm doing the same thing I did when I was 20 and it worked. And now I'm 30, it doesn't work. And then when you see them at 50, they may even gain weight with doing that same thing. Because the body essentially thinks that we're in a famine when we're trying to eat less and move more. Our bodies were designed to survive famine. So if we're running on the treadmill and eating salads, our body thinks that we're running around the desert looking for food and can't find it. And that's why it makes it easy to regain weight so that we don't die in this famine or the next one. And of course, there are other contributors to obesity like sleep, which we are probably all lacking in. And trying to get 7 hours of sleep is what I tell my patients. Medications can cause weight gain, changes in physical activity, social determinants of health, access to care or access to facilities that can help us with our physical activity. Of course, one thing is food insecurity can be a contributor to obesity, and certain illnesses. PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And one of the components of this condition is insulin resistance. I'll talk about what insulin resistance means a little bit later, but that is the part of polycystic ovarian syndrome, which makes women who have this prone to weight gain. Other conditions like untreated hypothyroidism, Cushing's disease, which is an adrenal gland dysfunction, are just some examples of medication of illnesses that can cause obesity. So when we're on one side trying to eat less and move more, the body is on the other side saying, you're hungry, you're not full, and I'm going to slow your metabolism. This is what metabolic adaptation is. It's our body's natural desire to gain weight so we can survive famines. However, we know we don't live in a situation where there's a lack of access to any food at all. Most of the time, we have a plenitude of opportunities to take in food now, and we can do a lot without activity. You know, how many calories does it take to put in the app how much you want to get delivered? We can obtain calories easily now without spending a lot of energy. So I'll move on to talk about treatment options, but I'll stop here and see if there's any questions in the chat that anyone might have put in about metabolic adaptation or anything I said so far. If you think of anything, please feel free to enter it into the chat as I'm speaking. I don't see anything just yet, so I'll move on to treatment options. I know this is why we came here. All right, so treatment options. Lifestyle modification is always the basis of weight management. So we never give medications without some kind of recommendations for lifestyle. Now, looking at studies with the best intentions, we see about 5% weight loss if you're really lucky with lifestyle over a long period of time, over a year or 2 years. Prescriptive nutritional interventions are things like specialized diets. So these are all things we offer in my office. We have a comprehensive weight management program. We offer everything from diets to medications to surgeries. All of these tools we offer in our center. Prescriptive nutritional interventions are things like meal replacements, meal delivery programs that can help you get more personalized care. Pharmacotherapy medications are indicated when the BMI is 27 and up with a weight-related comorbidity, or BMI 30 and up without a comorbidity. What that means is if your BMI is 27 to 29.99, if I want to get you a medication for weight management, I need to say you have something else other than obesity or overweight. So they would include, say, hypertension, cholesterol issues, diabetes, heart disease, sleep apnea, joint disease, many of these 238 conditions that I mentioned, but they want you to have a condition in addition to the overweight. And if your BMI is 30 and up, that's diagnosed as obesity, and then the prior authorizations usually allow you to get the medications if you have BMI 30 and up, but those are the guidelines. Endoscopic tools. So what you see here in the picture is an intragastric balloon. This is a procedure that is still performed. And basically, they take a deflated balloon and put it at the end of an endoscopy trocar. And the patients, just like when you have a colonoscopy or upper endoscopy. They place the patient under sedation and they insert the balloon through the mouth, through the esophagus, into the stomach, and then they inflate it either with air or liquid. And then they keep it there for 6 months, and then that's removed. So that is a reversible procedure. There are some other endoscopic procedures, such as endoscopic sleeve gastrectomy, that involve either the surgeon stitching or placing these little, I think of them as needles that sort of bring the stomach in. So there are endoscopic procedures for those who are at that criteria, kind of BMI 30 to 40. And bariatric surgery is definitely still performed. We did see the bariatric surgery numbers drop in the last couple of years with the increased popularity of these medications, but the most commonly performed bariatric surgery is now the sleeve gastrectomy. And this is, of course, done under general anesthesia. And they basically remove 70% of the stomach, and it is gone. It doesn't come back. It doesn't grow back. They tend to pathology, and I say they throw it in the trash. So that's a permanent procedure. It's not meant to be reversed. The second most widely performed bariatric surgery procedure is the room-wide gastric bypass. Sure, you've heard of that. And then the laparoscopic gastric band, or lap band, is another procedure that involves placing a device around the stomach that can be tightened to allow a patient to feel more full, or loosened to let them eat more. So these are really the criteria for the different treatment options. And I want to let you know, I'm going to specifically talk about GLP-1s. That was the task I was given today, but there are other medications for weight management that are not GLP-1s. So if you can't get insurance to cover this, if you can't pay for it, or you're not a candidate because some people can't take it or cannot tolerate it, there are other medications. So I just want to point out here are the weight loss percentages with various other medications other than the GLP-1s we'll talk about tonight. So if you're going to talk to your prescriber about medication, just know GLP-1s are not the only option. And I do prescribe every medication that's available for weight loss, either on label or even off label. So we do have treatment options that are not $1,000 and up per month. I just want you to leave knowing that. All right. All right, but I was asked to speak about GLP-1 receptor agonists, and that's what we'll move on to now. Any questions? I'll check the chat really quick. I still see just the first comment.
It looks like we have it looks like we do have a question in the chat. Can you talk about how these medicines work with women who are in menopause?
Yes, absolutely. So I was just on a radio show talking about my guest was a menopausal specialist, and we refer back and forth patients to each other, because what happens with menopause is the fat cell becomes dysregulated because of estrogen changes. Estrogen, progesterone levels change, and that makes the fat cells start to get bigger. And I've seen women come in menopause, perimenopause, and say, I never had this little stomach, and I have it now, and I never had to worry about it. Now I'm in menopause. What do I do? And it's very devastating. And sometimes they're not even in a class of obesity, but they don't feel like they're in their own body. So we do treat these conditions of weight gain, because I believe in prevention of obesity too. I don't always wait till it's obesity to do something. So sometimes we do use metformin, actually. It was a medication that reverses stability of fat cells in women who are gaining weight with menopause. And the way that works, it just makes your body respond more to the insulin that you naturally make. And it can cause weight loss, usually about the 5-10 pound range or so. But I do find if that is not effective, the GLP-1 receptor agonists are extremely effective in treating postmenopausal weight gain. And we do get similar outcomes in postmenopausal women as we do men or premenopausal women. Okay. So this is a chart I made to actually show my patients in the office, because, excuse the little squiggly lines here, but Word does not recognize these names, and that's why those squiggly lines are there. But what I want to point out are these are names of medications we use for type 2 diabetes and for weight loss. And a lot of people come in and they ask me for Ozempic, and I say, you don't have type 2 diabetes, this will not be covered for you. But we can look at Wegovy, for example, which is his weight loss counterpart. Okay, so I actually have it here. This is Ozempic. Okay, this is what an Ozempic pen looks like. And with this one, I won't go through the full demonstration, but if you've never seen it, you have to kind of screw the needle on. You turn a little dial here, and you squirt that out in your leg or abdomen or thigh. So this is what Ozempic looks like. This is Wegovy, okay? It's just a different pen, but the same exact ingredient is in it. That's semaglutide, or if you want to call it semaglutide. Same company makes it, same compound. The point I want to give you here is that we need to stay on label with the medication. So that's why people come in asking for Ozempic and I end up giving them Wegovy because their insurance doesn't cover off-label medication use. I'll just move on to the bottom. So Mounjaro, you might have heard of. It's a GLP-1 agonist that has an additional receptor that it targets called GIP. And that basically helps the GLP work better. I'll show you some of the trials and the outcomes with this. But Mounjaro looks like this, okay? And it's also a weekly injection. It's a single-use cartridge. The Zepbound pen looks exactly the same, okay? Like this is the Zepbound one. This is the Mounjaro. They're exactly the same drug made by the same company to treat different conditions. So people come in asking for Mounjaro, say you don't have diabetes, we give you Zepbound. And Saxenda is a daily version. So before we had these weeklies, we gave daily GLP-1, Saxenda, and it looks similar to the Ozempic one. That's the medication. You do have to dial it. There are different doses. So just to let you know what these pens look like. And also why you might walk out of your doctor's office with a different name than you asked for. Okay. Now, how do these work? All right, we'll start here in the middle. GLP-1, I mentioned, is a hormone that we make in our intestines. And what it does, one, is there's evidence that it decreases cardiac risk. I'll talk about the trial that proved that. Goes to the brain, it blocks about 80% of the brain's hunger signals. It goes to the stomach and it actually slows down the rate the stomach empties. I want to make this clear. It slows down the rate the stomach empties. It does not cause gastroparesis. Gastroparesis is a condition where the nerves that innervate or supply the smooth muscle of the stomach are dead. The medication does not kill these nerves. It does slow down the rate food empties the stomach. And that gets a lot of, there's a lot of confusion, or there's certain lawsuits and things that say the medications cause gastroparesis. And I think it has to do more with semantics, that people are confusing the two, the medical condition of gastroparesis with slowing gastric emptying. All right. The third thing, that all of these little organs here, that's a pancreas, that's a liver, and that's a muscle cell. The third thing, again, is the medications hormonally make us more insulin sensitive, and that's how they help fat cells shrink. So just, again, decreases appetite, makes the stomach empty more slowly, hormonally helps fat cells shrink. That's the mechanism. And here are some of the studies. So I'll just go through this really quickly. This is the study that was done. It's called SCALE for Saxenda. Saxenda is liraglutide. It's known as Saxenda for weight loss, Victoza for diabetes, if you ever heard of that one. And in this trial, the placebo group got diet and exercise recommendations. They lost about 4 kilograms. And with the other lines you see here are different doses of the Saxenda. The green line is another medication, orlistat, which I won't go too much into tonight. But the different doses of liraglutide all generated better weight loss than placebo. So that's why the medication is able to be brought to market. And at the highest dose, we saw 3 times as much weight loss with the Saxenda arm than with the placebo arm. And just to explain the second part of this chart, they did a crossover study. So basically they said, okay, placebo group, you probably figured out you're on placebo by this year, so we're going to give you the medication. And at that point, the placebo group you see here in gray also lost to the same point where the people who were on the medication were. So that's why you see that line change. Right? So that's the Saxenda study. Semaglutide. So again, semaglutide is Ozempic for diabetes, which goes up to 2 milligrams, and it's Wegovy at 2.4 milligrams. So this is really the effects of a landmark trial demonstrating, at the time this was published, it was the greatest weight loss of any medication used for weight management ever. And you saw the placebo group here. Again, they'd had diet and exercise. They didn't just get nothing. They lost about 8%, which is really good. Usually you see about 3% weight loss in a placebo group. They lost 8%. These people were seeing a dietitian, counting calories, exercising. But what I want to point out here, after about 6 months, you start to see this line increase. Remember the patient I showed you at the beginning? They lost some weight, and then you start to see it come back up. That happens because of metabolic adaptation. That did not happen with the semaglutide or Wegovy group. They lost an 18% body weight. And if you look at this study closely, there's another graph, but I didn't put it in here. They actually lost 20% of the people who actually were taking the medication, taking it the right way consistently. They lost 20%. So I tell people expect about 20% weight loss with this. And then what about more than the recommended 5%. You know, the doctors say you should lose 5% of your weight to improve your medical condition. People don't want to lose 5%. They want to lose 20%. That's a 200-pound person losing 40 pounds, for example. So we saw almost 40% of those on the semaglutide or Wegovy group lose that much. What this means here, 20% MACE reduction. Again, this is a landmark trial that I was involved in. We did this at our center. It was an international trial with over 12,000 subjects internationally. And basically they were looking at people who had heart disease, meaning they had a heart attack or stroke, and they either put them on placebo or the actual Wegovy, and they followed them for 5 years. And they found that there was a 20% reduction in a second heart attack or stroke in people on the medication. And that led to some changes in the reasons we can use it. They actually prefer this drug in people who have heart disease over other weight loss medications. And this is an example of a 38-year-old Black female I had in the trial. Now, at the time, we were a placebo-controlled blinded trial. But looking at this weight graph, this is when we started the trial up here. I guess that she was on the actual medication because she lost 93 pounds in a period of 19 months. And that was 33% of her weight. So this is just an example of a real world situation with Wegovy or semaglutide. Sorry, this is a little blurry. This is looking at tirzepatide. So tirzepatide is the main ingredient in Mounjaro and Zepbound, okay? These. And at the time this was published, this is now the highest weight loss of any medication we use for weight management. It's 23% is what they found in the trials. And what all these bars just mean is how many people responded with at least 5% weight loss. And it was 90.9% of people responded with at least 5% weight loss. That's a 200-pound person losing 10 pounds. Now, but that does also mean that about 10% of people did not respond. So again, if you or someone you know or love is on the medication and not getting at least 5% weight loss, they're not a responder and other options should be considered. All right, I see a couple of questions. Let's see. Oh, it's a long one. I'll condense the question a little bit. So the question is about the controversy with BMI and does it apply as far as a marker for obesity diagnosis in Black and Brown communities. Famala Fleming, EQ, asked that she was aware that in Asian communities, they actually did change the BMI cutoff to lower it for obesity and overweight, because it was found that in Asian populations at BMIs below 25, which is the cutoff for overweight, they were having disease, heart disease, diabetes, fatty liver disease. So they actually lowered that. So when I do see an Asian patient, we can say your BMI is 23, they qualify for medications sometimes, whereas if we're not Asian, we can't get that. Now, the question I think might be a little bit opposite though for Black or Brown communities, specifically women, because they tend to carry more of this hip and waist type of fat. And that is something that is not as correlated with disease like heart disease. That's more midsection fat is correlated with heart disease and with mortality or death. So there is a drive to change the BMI cutoff specifically for Black individuals, and even to consider doing that for Black women as well. It's not to fruition just yet, but there is definitely a drive to do that. And we know as medical providers, I know as a doctor, the BMI is not perfect, okay? We took The Rock, the wrestler, the actor, he's obese if we do his height and weight, okay? So other ways that we determine obesity are waist circumference. And this is a cutoff that is more consistent with fat mass accumulation and cardiac risk. So waist circumference over 35 inches in a female or over 40 inches in a male can be classified as obesity, and we can use this for medications to get approved. And then actually in my office, we do body fat measurements. So sometimes I have people whose weight and height is low, their BMI is low, but they have a lot of fat mass that they're carrying. So we can use that to help patients either say you're not have obesity or overweight, or you do based on your fat percentage. So these are more concrete measures that we can do in the office. The next question is, will we recommend these medications for youth? All right, let's go through that. So Zepbound is not approved for anyone under 18 at this time. Wegovy is approved for ages 12 and up. Other weight loss medications. There's one that we also use. Saxenda is also approved for 12 and up. Okay, that's the daily injection. The other weight loss medications like phentermine, Qsymia aren't indicated for younger populations, and neither is Contrave, which is Wellbutrin, bupropion. So, and of course, in conjunction with lifestyles, they have done studies with Saxenda and with Wegovy on adolescents 12 to 17. All right, so I want to talk about weight bias.
We had 2 more questions. Can you?
Oh, 2 more questions? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so we've heard that the side effects are extreme. Why and how do the meds affect those with GERD? And is it a lifetime med?
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed those questions at the top.
That's okay.
So I didn't include this in the slides because I knew someone would ask this question. So let's just talk about Wegovy semaglutide. So they did a study looking at what happens when you take the medication and you stop, and the short answer is you regain weight. This is why. The medication's physiologically helping. It's making your appetite change, it's making your stomach change, it's emptying, and it's making your fat cells shrink. So I think of it not only as make your fat cells shrink, but it sort of puts a cage around your fat cells, and the smaller the fat cells get, the tighter the cage is. And then when you stop the medication, the cage comes off and the fat cell starts to do metabolic adaptation again. It starts to essentially feed itself insulin, get bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, we have that appetite change. I actually had a Black woman come in today. She saw one of my colleagues last month, and I said, well, why are you on a lower dose than I put you on? She had to stop her medication for some reason, and we had to start it back up. She said, I was fine. She was on Wegovy. Said, I was fine for the first week. I didn't gain any weight. I wasn't hungry. The second week, I started to feel a little more hungry. And the third week, my appetite was very high because the body, one, is giving you the hunger signals that were suppressed by the medication. And then the fat cells, again, can start to get bigger. So these medications are intended to be used chronically, meaning for life, to answer your question. In my practice, if we stop a medication because we have to or a patient can't tolerate it, we do so with the plan, and that leads us back to lifestyle. And that's diet, exercise, behaviors. And if patients are regaining more than 5%, they put themselves at risk for having weight-related conditions. And I say, you may not need this, but you may need something to help you keep the weight off. So we do have options for that don't necessarily include staying on it forever. And I've seen it both ways. I've seen some people stop the medication and they don't gain a pound. And I've seen some people stop the medication and they do everything right, calories, exercise, and they regain the weight very quickly. So again, these are genetic factors that we don't fully understand yet as far as who will regain weight and who won't. But in most cases, there is weight regain. We lose the physiologic benefit. And the question about nausea. So in different studies, we have different reports of nausea. So with Zepbound, I'll just start, that's the most recent medication, also known as Mounjaro. Nausea is reported at different doses. I'll just say at the highest dose reported about 25% of the time, which is pretty low, actually, I think. I really see any patient on these meds has some nausea at some point. Okay, when they report these numbers, this is nausea that the patient thought it was enough. They want to tell their doctor. You know, it's like, oh, I have some queasiness, that's okay. But I had nausea, doc. That's when they report it. With Wegovy, it was 44% of nausea. And the reason this occurs is twofold. One, the stomach is just emptying slowly. So anything that's there is just sitting there. Think about a boat rocking back and forth in the ocean. Everything's just sitting there in your stomach. That's what nausea feels like. The other reason we have nausea is because your hunger signals are blocked. Keep in mind, the body is very resilient. If you're eating less and moving more, your body is trying to send those ghrelin hunger hormones, but the medication is blocking it. So again, the brain sends another message that's nausea to make you eat. That's another reason we have nausea. Now, mitigating strategies for nausea. You don't want to eat a lot of fatty food, fried food, oily food with this medication because that can make nausea worse. And I recommend that patients definitely don't mix fat with alcohol because alcohol, fat, and the medication all slow down your stomach emptying. And that can make you more prone to not only nausea, but vomiting. Now, vomiting. Vomiting is the one side effect I do not tolerate my patients. If they have vomiting even one time, I tell them to call me. It could mean because your dose is too high. It could be a more serious problem like pancreatitis, which is the worst thing that can happen on these medications. That's an inflammation of the pancreas, which could lead to hospitalization, bleeding, death. So that's really the worst thing that can happen with medication. So if someone's having vomiting frequently, they really should either have the dose lower, be evaluated, or the medication should be potentially discontinued. And the question about reflux. So with the medications, again, they slow down the rate of gastric emptying. So anything that's in your stomach, it's easier for it to go up than down, and that includes acid. So I do have patients who have any form of reflux or heartburn at baseline, start an acid reducer when they start the medication, because at first it may get worse before it gets better because your stomach emptying is delayed, but you haven't lost weight yet. So then the acid can come up easier. But once you lose weight, the patients have less pressure on their stomach, so they produce less acid. There's less likelihood of reflux. We're usually able to discontinue or reduce some acid reducing medication if reflux is present at baseline.
Got it.
Okay. I want to go to the next few slides. We only have 10 minutes. Okay. I just want to talk about weight bias. Weight bias is really prevalent both in the medical community and outside. And I'm sure anyone with obesity has been subject to weight bias, possibly by their own family members, colleagues, friends. They surveyed almost 2,000 minority subjects, and they said 54% of them personally had experienced weight bias in some form. And I was shocked this wasn't 100%. And they did ask some other questions. And they said more of our Black respondents, more than the AAPI respondents, thought that race and ethnicity play a role in how healthcare providers treat people with obesity. I mean, they feel they are not treated either fairly or justly for their obesity. And they asked people in, again, the survey, how do you feel about the likelihood of us having laws against weight discrimination? And we know that the weight bias was considered a form of discrimination in New York last year by Mayor Adams. And it was found this survey that Black subjects, female subjects, and those who actually believe obesity is a disease are more in support of laws against weight discrimination and weight bias. So I give you this information because I think we should all be aware that weight bias exists, both implicit weight bias, meaning it's unconscious, or explicit weight bias, where someone is saying something nasty or acting a negative way to someone with a weight condition. And I just want us all to be aware of this. And one of my passions is actually to teach medical students, existing faculty, about weight bias, and to ask them to put aside their implicit bias, because you can't get rid of it. You can't unteach implicit bias, but you can teach differences in explicit bias. And one of those is in the terms that we use. And both inside and outside the medical community, they found that people prefer these terms. And I just want to go over those with you quickly. People do not like to hear the word fat, morbidly obese, chubby. They prefer using weight. So for example, I asked my patient, can we have a discussion about your weight? How do you feel about your weight? I don't ask them, how do you feel about your obesity, for example. These were terms that were preferred by patients: weight, unhealthy weight, high BMI. Some people liked high BMI, some people didn't. But these are the most preferred terms. And I mention this because as you write about obesity or read about obesity or talk about obesity, these terms are preferred. And the other thing you'll notice is we should use a person first language. So a person with obesity, not obese person. It is not an adjective. Right. And we use other strategies in weight management clinic to help our patients feel comfortable. So this is a picture of my office.
That's a wise.
We have different. Could you please mute your microphones if you don't mind? We have different size scales and different chairs for people of all sizes, so we can help our patients feel comfortable. And again, using language on how do you feel about your weight. All right, so lifestyle tips I was asked to address. And the short answer to this, how do we lose weight, is yes, we try to eat less and move more, but it is more complicated than that. Okay, I could spend another 4 hours talking about different diets, but I will not do that. We have 6 minutes left. So these are some just top 10 factors that usually we can agree upon. That added sugar is not great. Omega-3s are excellent for our health. We don't get a lot of them. There's no one diet for everyone. It's whatever the patient will follow that can help them create a caloric deficit. And also, sometimes people have medical conditions where they need to avoid certain foods or have more of a type of food. For example, I recommend patients with cholesterol have high fiber really all my patients I recommend have high fiber, but the importance for people with diabetes and cholesterol, fiber content. Trans fats are very unhealthy. These are fried foods, lard. You want 0 trans fat in your nutrition label. Vegetables are great for us. Vitamin D deficiency, even though they say everyone has it, that's not good. We want to make sure we address vitamin D deficiency because it can create bone disease, which can lead to fractures. Refined carbohydrates, these are things in a bag or a box that are not great for us. Dieting temporarily does not work. I think we can all agree upon that. Unprocessed food is healthy as whole foods. And supplements, I actually don't recommend vitamins other than vitamin D for my patients because as Americans, we don't have a problem with undernutrition. It's really more overnutrition, but vitamin D deficiency is quite common because it is a fat-soluble vitamin. And with our prevalence of obesity, the fat cell sequesters the vitamin D that we get from our diet, and that's why we have a lot of vitamin D deficiency. So I do treat that with supplements. Okay, I want to point this out, basically why we recommend high fiber carbohydrates. So if we look at this graph, what we're seeing is time on the x-axis and blood glucose level on the y-axis. And if you take in a diet or a meal even that has high in protein, fiber, whole grains, and high fiber fruits and vegetables, you see the glucose level rises to a moderate level, and then it comes down 4 to 5 hours later. If we eat something very sugary, the foods you see here, like ice cream and actual sugar, the blood glucose rises very quickly. That causes a surge of insulin, which makes it drop really quickly. And that can all happen within 2 hours. And it actually makes you more hungry, again, to eat something like that. And that's why foods like breads and pasta and potatoes, we can eat a lot of them and they can actually become addictive because we're constantly chasing this up and down with blood glucose. And this is a cycle of insulin resistance I alluded to earlier. Again, the fat cell is the organ of dysfunction and obesity, and it actually feeds itself insulin. So I recommend that we avoid eating carbohydrates alone. By that, I mean have carbohydrates always paired with a protein. Protein being any type of meat, fish, eggs, tofu, protein powder, yogurt, cottage cheese, because it avoids that having that huge increase and then drop in glucose that you saw on the previous slide. These are some examples of protein-rich foods. And again, I know I'm running out of time. I just want to point out about nutrition labels. A really easy way to determine if a food is a fat, a carbohydrate, or a protein is to look at the label. And whatever it has the most of, that's what it is. So if this food has 1 gram of fat, 32 grams of carbs, and 5 grams of protein, it is a carbohydrate. So look at the back of a label when you're reading, considering buying a food or eating a food, because that's where they have to tell the truth. The front, they can not really lie, but they are just pointing out their good parts and leaving out some other things. I do not recommend juicing of any type. I don't care who made it. It is all sugar. When you have a fruit, it is composed of the fiber in the fruit. It has natural sugar. It has minerals and vitamins. When you juice it, you see here, you lose the fiber. So you then have the water, you have the vitamins and minerals, and you have the natural sugar. The body sees that the same as taking a vitamin and drinking Kool-Aid. It sees it no differently. So please don't waste your money on these expensive things and eat whole fruits and vegetables. All right, and there's my little explanation of that. So we don't want to just have Kool-Aid and vitamins. And these are, easy, convenient ways we can get our fruits and vegetables from our local, even street markets. And I just want to point out portions do matter. We can have the same foods, but different portions can either bring weight loss or weight gain. And I'll just leave you with some example of how portion changes can really benefit us. We don't have to exclude foods that we like, but changing the amounts can really help us get weight loss versus weight gain. And I thank you for your time, and I'll answer any questions you have.
All right. Those last few slides there made me really hungry. So
Sorry.
standing between, we're probably standing between the end of this and somebody's dinner. But I did want to ask, there's a couple of questions here. One is, how do we make an appointment with you?
You can email here. I didn't put my phone. You just email me and I'll get you in touch with my schedulers. Thank you.
So we'll leave that email up. We also have a couple of asking, someone was on Wegovy, was not able to continue due to supply shortages. What other meds are there that are more available without interruption, if you know?
And just so Wegovy back now. It's available again. So pharmacies can order it. Zepbound for weight loss does not have a lot of drug shortages. So if you've been off though Wegovy for more than 2 weeks, you do have to start back from the lower doses. Please do not start back at a high dose. You will end up in the emergency room. Having too many of my patients. So if we're still looking at GLP-1, Wegovy, Zepbound. Saxenda supply is dwindling a little bit. It's the daily one. But there are other medications I had in that slide that are not the GLP-1s that could be offered, including things like Qsymia, Contrave, or other medications.
Right. If these treatments are meant to be taken for life, does that mean that as time goes on, the dosage will continue to increase? And if so, it's the maximum dosage that can be prescribed to patients. Will eventually all patients taking these drugs have to stop taking the medications once they've reached the max dosage prescribed?
So all the medications have dosing recommendations, and you start low and go up to the highest tolerable dose for the individual patient. So there, you don't just keep going up and up and up. So for example, with Wegovy, the top dose is 2.4. With Zepbound, the top dose is 15. And if you're responding to that, you just stay there. So we don't go to 20 or 30 or higher than that. Now, what will happen in the future, I can't tell you. But one, we do have other drugs I didn't talk about today that are even better than the ones that we have available. So it's highly likely that if you're taking one of these, you may in the future be able to take a medication every month, for example, instead of every week, or maybe you'll have something every year. So we're always trying to develop new medications that can be more beneficial. And the last question, will patients have to stop taking the medicine once they reach the max? No, you're intended to keep taking the maximum tolerated dose for you if the plan is to continue the medication. Perfect. You don't have to stop.
What are your thoughts about magnesium?
Magnesium is great for many things. So magnesium, think about it this way, it's sort of, it slows down smooth muscle. So it's good for, it's actually good for, inside the GI tract is good for constipation. There's versions that are good for sleep, and there's versions that are good for heart palpitations. So magnesium's great. You have to make sure it's the right one for what you need though. It also prevents migraines. So for example, you don't want to take the constipation one if you're trying to avoid migraines. So there are different forms of magnesium for various conditions. Yes.
Okay. I think we can share the slides, right? Dr.
Yeah.
Lawson?
Yes.
And we will be downloading the recording. This is being recorded, and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. So there's that, if we can do that. And long-term side effects that you can speak to?
Yeah, the side effects are GI that are most reported: nausea, constipation, loose stools, Pepsi or reflux, some abdominal pain. The question about Trulicity, I did not mention Trulicity because it is for type 2 diabetes, and there is no weight loss equivalent of Trulicity. That's why I didn't bring it up tonight. But it looks like this too. This is actually a Trulicity.
That's Trulicity?
Yeah, this is Trulicity.
Oh, that's
in our slides tonight. Yeah.
And
it looks like
can you speak to the average cost for the uninsured for this, or how is it covered?
Yes. All right. Hold on to your seats here. All right. So I'll tell you, if you're just pay out of pocket completely for Zepbound, it's about $1,100. If your insurance doesn't cover it though, there's a coupon that gets it down to $550. Wegovy total out of pocket cost is $1,400 a month. There's a coupon to get that down to $1,000. Saxenda is about $1,000 as well. I'm not sure they even have coupons anymore. It's been out for a while. So, and Ozempic, even though it's off label for weight loss, I'll tell you the reason you hear a lot about Ozempic is because Wegovy's $1,400, and essentially its diabetes version is $800. So if someone's going to pay out of pocket like a celebrity, they're going to pay $800, not $1,400 for the same drug. That's why you hear Ozempic so much when Wegovy is the one for weight loss.
Okay. All right. I think we've come to the end of the questions, but I do have one last question. I know we've gone over, so just bear with me. And this is in your role as a woman of color and also a clinician. What about these revolutionary weight loss drugs gives you hope? I think we could answer that based on the presentation, but what also concerns you?
What gives me hope is it's changing the way we're thinking about obesity, and people are starting to understand it's a disease. Talk to your doctor about it. Whereas before, even doctors would say, you have a weight issue, go figure it out on your own. Don't come talk to me about it. So that's one starting to change the conversation about obesity. And hopefully that will lead to less weight bias. The weight bias is still too prevalent. Concerns are misuse. I think a lot of reason we hear about sensational side effects in the media is because, one, great stories like the one I showed you, lady lost 93 pounds. I pitched those to the media. They don't want to hear that. They want to talk about crazy things happening. But patients are being prescribed this medication and they're getting it online from dubious sources and not someone who knows how to dose the medication or who can take it and who can't. And that leads to significant side effects. And this can be really detrimental to someone's health. So I do think, while it doesn't have to be a weight management specialist, someone who knows how to prescribe the medication to dose it is very necessary to determine, one, if someone's a candidate and what they should do with their medication dosing, and also give the lifestyle recommendations.
I think that is a perfect way to end it. All right. If you have any other questions, you should contact Dr. Lofton, because there's no way
Okay.
what you just said. This has really been fantastic. I so appreciate you, Dr. Lofton, for being with us tonight. You've given us tremendous information. It was better than the Oprah. It was better than the Oprah thing. I'm telling you, it was better than the Oprah thing, I'm sure. And we will just have to have you back for, a part 2 on this in probably another 6 months, because that's how this thing is evolving. And thank all of you. Thank you to all of you. You're getting some kudos here, Dr. Lofton, in the chat. But thank you so much for everyone who was able to stick with us, stick this out, even 6 minutes late. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Bye,
evening.
everyone.
See you next time.
Thank you, Dr. Lofton.
Bye-bye.
Sure.
Thanks, everyone.